last resort for those unable to secure themselves anything better through varying reasons, mainly because they had no fixed abode or were ex-prisoners. It was far better than living rough. The job did have its perks for the gaff lads, though, as a certain type of female was dazzled by any man connected to the fair, seeing them in the same light as a knight in shining armour, and praying to land one and be whisked into what they believed was a glamorous thriller-minute life, far removed from their mundane one, governed by their parents' rules and regulations. They didn't realise that, apart from an isolated occasion when a fairground employee did lose his heart to one of these girls, their only interest in them was for sex. All the main rides were in the middle of the fair area, several circular stalls such as Hook-a-Duck and Hoopla dotted between them, the rest forming a horseshoe shape around the boundary edge, the entrance being the gap in the middle. The living caravans were sited a few yards behind the stalls and rides, before a tangle of dense undergrowth that edged a run-down part of a canal. The dodgems where Solly was heading were towards the back of the rides area, and, to avoid having to fight his way through the crowds at the entrance, he skirted the back of the stalls and was just about to sidle through a narrow gap, when above the noise coming from the fair itself, the sound of an angry voice along with someone else yelping in pain reached his ears. It was coming from the edge of the waste ground several yards away, where a high wire fence separated it from a building site where the council was building new houses to replace slums. The lights from the fairground didn't reach that far, so Solly couldn't see what was going on. But it seemed to him that someone was getting a savage beating. He groaned inwardly. He really needed to be supervising the two gaff lads on the dodgems, the most popular ride at the moment, certainly Grundy's most profitable one. He not only needed to be on hand to keep a watchful eye on the lads, but also to manage troublesome sorts who didn't like waiting their turn and started making a nuisance of themselves. But apart from the fact that his morals would not allow him to walk away from someone who was in trouble, whether they deserved it or not, should a member of the public happen upon this and call the police, it would be enough excuse for them to close the fair down for the night. Off duty, the police enjoyed a visit to the fair with their families as much as anyone else did. But on duty, some of them regarded being called to deal with incidents at the fair as an extra burden they could do without, on top of all the other everyday crimes, and would therefore treat fair-related matters far more harshly. Without further ado, Solly spun on his heels and hurried over the uneven ground in the direction the commotion was coming from. His guess that someone was being thrashed was a correct one. Due to the darkness and the lack of any man-made light in this part of the ground, Solly was on top of the scene before he could actually make out what was going on. A middle-aged, thick-set, shabbily dressed man was beating someone with a sturdy walking stick. They were scruffily dressed too, curled up in a fetal position on the ground, hysterically screaming for the attacker to stop. Solly noticed a large tear in the sleeve of his thin brown jacket. The man had his arm raised, ready to deliver the stick down again on his victim, but without further ado, Solly grabbed his wrist in a vice-like grip, demanding, "That's enough of that now, unless you want to land in prison for murder." The attacker was stunned by Solly's intervention and stood staring at him for several moments before he gathered his wits and tried frantically to free his wrist from Solly's hold. "Get the fuck off me! I'm only giving me son what he deserves. Now get off me, I said." This incensed Solly. Grown men beating each other was one thing, but an older man beating a child, and his son at that, was not right to Solly. As a father of two strapping sons himself, he knew only too well that at times during their adolescence they had tested his patience to its very limits. But to beat them half to death by way of punishment, to use manly strength on a juvenile, was totally despicable behaviour to him. He abhorred any man that did this. He hissed, "I'm sure whatever your lad's done doesn't warrant being beaten to death. I'll not let you free until you calm down." The man responded, "I'll bloody calm down when me son promises to do as he's told. He knows the score, should he disobey me." He again desperately tried to free his wrist and kicked out a shoddy workman's booted foot, aiming for Solly's shin. But Solly preempted what he intended, and whilst still gripping the man's wrists, jumped out of the way. At his failure to free himself, with his free hand, the man